Social distancing at the chamber. My name is Garrick Taylor. This is Happy Hour with Hammer. As always, joined by the CEO of the Arizona Chamber, Glenn Hammer. Glenn, I am socially distanced tonight in our conference room. There's nobody here. It's empty. In fact, Glenn, you've been to the office a couple times, as have I. There's plenty of good parking in the garage. No one's here.
It's true. It's really just strange when I've gone into the office. It's like it's a little bit like the adult version of Home Alone.
Right. Nobody's here, but glad to be here virtually tonight with our special guest, Jim Rounds. Glenn, Jim put out quite a paper, so let's talk about it.
Well, it's always a treat to have the best economists in the state with us, Jim. Your paper that you did for Goldwater that just came out, I think it was yesterday. It was this week. I know that really had some incredible information. And to me, the punchline was that about 50% or so of the entities or people that are filing under this Invest in Ed Prop 208 tax scheme are really pass-throughs and small businesses. Can you talk a little bit about that finding and some of the others in this very important paper?
Yeah, there were a number of findings. Some of them are more on the fiscal side, some more on the economic side. But on the economic stuff that you were talking about, we tried very carefully to break the analysis into individual components that just make logical sense. So we actually did the logic test on the front end and said, can we model the state slowing a little bit in job growth? And we took it down from 1.7 to 1.6% or something close. Is it going to impact wage growth? Well, yes. If it's going to be impacting business recruitment, it's going to be impacting wage growth. So you slow it by another, little bit. Well, we kept going on the impacts. Reduction in business recruitment, maybe some decay in the current economy as a whole, just because we're less competitive. We got a number that was, it seems large, but given the context of what we're dealing with, maybe it isn't. And that was 124,000 job losses by year 10. And I know that there's some individuals that are maybe saying, we're only dealing with about 3% of tax filers falling under this category. Well, if you take a look at the number of people that lost their jobs, we're still down another 75,000. That percentage of the population is less than the percentage that's going to be impacted by this initiative, but that's an extremely critical issue. Even though it's not a high percentage, it's important. So looking at this like a normal person would look at it and then doing the math, the impacts were big, man.
The fact, though, that out of I don't know if it was about 90,000 Arizonans who will be hit by this, about half of them are really, they're really small businesses.
Yeah, that's right. And there's a difference of opinion because in the tax statutes, it doesn't say small business. It references the way tax policy has to be implemented for different groups that pay under the individual income tax. And so, you've had others on before that have talked about the pass through of the money and that you're still taxed on the profits that you might be retaining that you don't take out. There's all sorts of negative implications when we're talking about this particular tax increase. But yeah, 3% of the total filers are going to be impacted, but half of those that are impacted are small businesses. And it's still a big piece of our economy, and it's a part of the economy that's going to struggle for the next couple of years, even after we get into economic recovery in 2021.
How about the impact on the state budget? I thought that part was really very important. State and local budgets are going to see, because of that decay, that's a very important word. That actually might be the best word to describe this, what it will do. It will cause annual decay to our economy, and it gets worse every year because there's no inflation adjuster. But can you talk a little bit about the impact for the state budget and even local budgets for the rest of the programs?
Sure. And what ultimately happens when you have a dedicated tax source like this for the Prop 208 programs is that the program is still going to get the full amount of money. Even if the economy weakens, it's still going to be collecting a decent amount of money. The challenge, though, is at the state level. If we're down $2.5 billion between state and local, so 1.2, one and a quarter for the state component alone, we're dealing with reduced economic activity that translates into reduced tax collections, which translates into reduced ability to maintain our economic fundamentals, which then translates into slightly more negative economic growth. And I want to reiterate as many times as possible, when we went through this analysis, we laid out everything in the Goldwater paper and even some of the discussions and interviews that we've had, and we've been very fair. But breaking into the individual components, that 124,000 job loss figure, that was the most generous number we could come up with. I almost had to—
Meaning most conservative.
Most conservative. Had to push the limit a little bit on assumptions because I didn't want to have our low end be accused of being the sky is falling. But the sky isn't falling when you're losing a small percentage on your rate of growth or a medium to small percentage on your ability to recruit. But even those small changes, which is very difficult to say, I cannot believe that a big tax increase would cause that minuscule reduction in economic growth. Most people would say, yeah, that is about right. So that means that they're accepting that this is going to be costing us an awful lot of money because the revenues are protected with the Prop 208 recipients. The reduced activity hits the general fund, which means it hits everybody.
So, and I also thought the paper, and I'm sorry, Garrick, for dominating here, but the paper several times mentions, you don't even get into the fact that there's a number of people, successful people who may leave the state or will never come to the state. There's no example that I could think of where a state jacks up its tax rate on the entrepreneurial class and people come flooding in. So we know we're going to see some decay in the number of high tax filers as well. And that's not even captured in your analysis. Is that correct?
Yeah, as severe as the numbers are, and keep in mind that the 124,000 jobs is more than we typically experience during a normal recession by many times over. And so after a number of years it builds, but much like that issue on the lack of inflation indexing, the economic decay, it's compound economic growth or compound economic decay. You have this upward sloping curve of more and more jobs being lost. So that second decade, you're not just going from 124 to double that, it's going to ultimately be triple that. And there's certain provisions that related to initiatives and changing public policy where we can't reevaluate it the next year and fix it. So this is a long-term issue.
So it feels to me like robbing Peter to pay Paul could come into effect here, because you're almost definitely going to see, there's no way this stimulates economic activity. It's how much you have the most conservative estimate, leaving out whole sections, including more well-to-do people who are just domicile in Texas, no income tax, Utah, lower income tax, Nevada, no income tax, Washington State, no income tax, et cetera, et cetera. But so if we have an issue in child safety or healthcare, they're going to be fighting universities, for example. They're going to be fighting over a shrinking part of the budget.
Yeah, that's right. And it's going to continue as long as, until something severe happens and the law is changed by another public vote, which doesn't happen very often. So long-term economic problems that build on one another, impacting different groups. It still very much bothers me, though, that we have to keep reminding people that small business owners are a part of who pays this tax, and the small business owners are the business. They're like myself. Sometimes I need to be the janitor. I had to do that yesterday, unfortunately. So you wear many hats. That really is the business. So there's all these numbers that we can talk about in the economic losses, but the lowest number where we excluded some categories to make sure we weren't double counting, it's still over 100,000 lost jobs. That's more than we're down right now from the COVID recession. So we need to think carefully about this.
Garrick?
Yeah, Jim, there's a term that came up in your paper. Right now, our top income tax rate, 4.5%, I think is a point that you and Glenn have made, Bob Robb made in the Republic, is that's not an outlier nationally. Regionally, it's about right. The four corner states were all under 5%. As Glenn just mentioned, Nevada doesn't even have an income tax. But at the top rate at 4.5%, then we have a certain number of tax filers who will be hit by this new effective rate of 8%. And you talk about the fact that it's disproportionate. Job creators will bear a disproportionate load from the Invest in Ed price tag. So the tax code is really tipped in one direction if 208 passes. Am I reading your paper right?
Yeah, and this is true for all taxpayers. If you take a look at the average income tax payments, state tax payments by income group, you can't even chart it without an adjustment because those with higher incomes pay hundreds of thousands, and you don't pay that much until you hit around 50,000 or so. So that kind of skews it a little bit. And what was that other question?
Well, just the disproportionate nature of the code. It's
Right.
you try to make a code, I would think, as equitable and transparent and as simple as possible, but that's not what would happen if this were to pass.
Yeah, I guess I'm struggling with this particular interview because I feel like I have 5 different concerns on each of the points that we're talking about, and it's hard to pick which one to bring up.
Yeah.
And I go back to, yeah, it's going to complicate things. Is the effective tax rate going to be 8%? No. But what do businesses look at when they work with site selectors? They look at top marginal rates. You cannot look at effective rates because no one can calculate effective rates at an individual or business level. So all of a sudden, it's not the discussion about, well, what are the effective rate increases? Who's really going to be impacted in the dollar amount? It's a big percentage. We're going to be taxing the business owners that are the ones that pay the vast majority of the taxes already. That's another concern. If a particular business group, the ones impacted, the half of the total, they're paying 90% of the taxes in their category. This is a very skewed tax system, and it's fine the way it is. It's competitive. We're talking about throwing it way out of balance. So.
I see. Glenn,
we enter this point in time where 20% teacher pay increase over 3 years, $1 billion in the bank going into the pandemic, arguably the best run state. The jobs machine is rocking and rolling. You can't even keep track of the jobs coming in. Teachers getting paid more, and that's great. We've supported that. And you have 25 years of Arizona's economic program at stake through Republican governors and a Democratic governor in Janet Napolitano, where we could all brag that we don't know how much better Arizona's business climate will be next year, but we know it's going to be better. And I also would love to contrast it that we don't know how much worse California's business environment will be, but we know it's going to be worse. I won't be able to say that anymore if this passes.
Yeah, I mean, we have to keep remembering that a lot of things make the economy tick, but it's going to be hard to convince people that moving in that direction with that one tax that is an extreme change, that it's not a signal that more items are going to happen related to public policy, increasing regulations. And from running a business, I know every single decision I have to make, every single tax or fee you think about, you have to, because it comes up a lot. So, the impact on small businesses, whether they're the really high income ones or the ones that are just barely in that threshold, they're already paying so much of the tax. It really is penalizing reinvestment by taxing it more.
And you have so many people in California and so many small businesses that are looking to relocate and that have been coming to Arizona. this just blows it up. And you have another neighboring state, Colorado, that's going to have something on their ballot to reduce their income tax. We don't know if it'll pass or not, but I mean, we could have a greater contrast with a neighboring competitor state in a few days. And, you know, I just think that these are a little bit of the warning lights are flicking in this state. Okay. This is cheap, not high-tech Hollywood special effects, but the warning lights are flickering. And you know, Jim, I just really appreciate all of your great work. You're the best in the business. You're very well respected, and I'm sure more to come.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Jim, thanks for being on. We'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, Garrick.
Thanks, Jim.
Hey, take care, guys.
Thank you. Great job. Thank you.